She thought I was weak, called me a freeloader, and then, with a casual cruelty that still stings, she threw me out. 2 suitcases, a cracked phone screen, and the bitter taste of betrayal were all I had left. My own daughter, the one I'd poured my life into, had decided I was disposable. But here's the kicker, the delicious twist that fate, or perhaps a higher power with a wicked sense of humor, had in store. The address she mailed my final belongings to? That very building, that very address. I bought it that morning. Cash. And now, sweetheart, rent is due. Oh, is it ever due? 3 years ago, I wasn't just mom. I was her world, her anchor, her biggest fan. I was the one who woke up early to pack her school lunches, always with a little note tucked inside. I spent weeks meticulously stitching sequins onto her prom dress, a labor of love that brought us closer, sitting on the living room floor, sharing secrets and laughter. When she finally struck out on her own, chasing big city dreams, I was right there, co-signing the lease on her very first apartment, beaming with pride as she held those keys. We used to finish each other's sentences, not each other's patience. Back then, our connection felt unbreakable, a tapestry woven with shared memories and unspoken understanding. I even lived in the downstairs unit of that very same triplex. It wasn't just convenient, it was a testament to our bond. I could water her plants when she traveled, a small act that made me feel connected to her life, even when she was thousands of miles away. Our shared Netflix account wasn't just practical, it was a ritual. No judgment for binge watching, no late fees, just endless popcorn nights and true crime marathons, huddled under a blanket, dissecting fictional mysteries while our own lives felt so wonderfully predictable. And her dog, that goofy golden retriever Buster, he was practically my grandchild. I babysat him when she pulled double shifts at the clinic, enjoying his slobbery kisses and wagging tail, feeling like I was still contributing, still needed. Life was quiet, predictable, and safe, a warm, comfortable cocoon. It was, I thought, forever. Until it wasn't. One Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed. A text from her. "We need to talk." My first thought, my utterly naive motherly instinct, was that she wanted my famous lasagna pointers. Maybe a new recipe, or tips on making the perfect bechamel sauce. I even started mentally listing ingredients. Instead, she arrived, not with a casserole dish, but with her new fiancé, Blake, a man whose presence always felt a little too slick, a little too polished. He stood awkwardly by the door, a silent accomplice. My daughter, usually so expressive, held herself stiffly, clutching a leather folder stuffed with printouts. My stomach clenched. This wasn't about lasagna. She slid a single sheet of paper across my beloved kitchen table, the one we'd shared so many meals on, so many stories. Notice to vacate. The words blurred, then sharpened, stabbing me. 30 days, Mom. Her exact words, delivered in a tone I barely recognized, cold and clinical, were like a punch to the gut. "You're an extra mouth. The utilities are brutal, and Blake needs the garage for his startup." I heard the words, but they didn't compute. My first reaction was a nervous, disbelieving laugh, a desperate attempt to diffuse the surreal absurdity of the situation. But then I saw her face, devoid of warmth, devoid of the love I'd always taken for granted. She wasn't joking, not even a little bit. She looked at me in a way I'll never forget, the way people look at expired milk. Sour, disposable, forgotten. A commodity that had outlived its usefulness. My throat closed, a physical chokehold of disbelief and rising panic. But I managed to push out a question, a desperate plea for clarity. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" She shrugged. A casual, dismissive shrug, as if I'd asked for directions to the nearest grocery store. "Friends? Shelter? You'll land on your feet. You always do." Always do. That phrase, meant to be reassuring, felt like a condemnation, It was her way of washing her hands of me, of justifying her callousness. That sentence, those chilling words, still echoes when I vacuum the hallway at night. A phantom whisper of rejection that keeps me company in the quiet dark. It replays in my mind, a cruel reminder of how quickly love can turn to stone, how fragile even the strongest bonds can become when convenience dictates the rules. That first night after the eviction notice, I found myself in my old Corolla, the one with the slightly sticky passenger window parked outside a 24-hour laundromat. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow, and the rhythmic thumping of industrial washers became a perverse lullaby. Every time a car drove by, I'd pull my hat lower, my heart pounding, shame a hot flush across my face. This wasn't just about being homeless. It was about being discarded by my own flesh and blood. The car, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a metal coffin closing in on me. Night 7. The city shelter. The air hung heavy with the scent of disinfectant and despair. Rows of cots, thin blankets, the hushed murmurs of other women, each with their own story of how they landed there. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. My mind racing, replaying every interaction, every word, searching for the moment I went wrong. Was it something I said? Something I didn't do? The guilt gnawed at me, a constant companion. Night 14, a motel. Not just any motel, but one that charged by the hour, its grim facade a monument to broken dreams. It smelled like bleach and desperation, a potent cocktail that made my eyes water. The bedspread was thin, stained, and every creak of the floorboards or distant siren sent shivers down my spine. This was my reality now. This was where my daughter had sent me. I applied for senior housing, a glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness. The response: waitlist. 14 months. 14 months of this? The thought alone was crushing. I swallowed my pride and called my brother, my last resort. His wife, bless her pragmatic heart, doesn't do couch surfing. The phone clicked dead, severing another lifeline. Every sunrise, as the first pale light crept into my temporary, desolate space, I replayed the eviction, like a broken film reel. I wondered which chapter of motherhood I had underlined wrong, which lesson I had failed to impart, or perhaps to learn myself. Pride kept me from texting her again, from begging, from showing any further vulnerability. But pain, a deep, bone-weary ache, kept me awake night after night. It was a constant companion, a reminder of what I had lost and who I had become. Funny thing about rock bottom, the view is terrible, absolutely abysmal. You're looking up at nothing but concrete and despair. But in that terrible view, you spot angles you never noticed before. Cracks in the pavement, glimmers of light filtering through, tiny weeds pushing through the asphalt. It forces you to look harder, to see possibilities you'd been too comfortable, too complacent, to notice when you were on solid ground. It's a harsh teacher, rock bottom, but it teaches. Week 4. 4 weeks of living on the fringes, of counting every penny, of feeling invisible. The shelter's mail clerk, a woman with kind eyes and a weary smile, handed me a scuffed envelope. It looked old, forgotten, like something that had traveled a long, circuitous route. The return address caught my eye. My late Aunt Ruth's lawyer. Aunt Ruth, a distant relative, a free spirit who'd always lived life on her own terms, a woman I hadn't thought about in years. My heart gave a strange little flutter. What could this be? Inside, carefully folded, were 2 items: a crisp, notarized letter and a check for $4,300. I stared at the numbers, then back at the letter, my hands trembling slightly. Ruth's estate had finally sold her mineral rights lease in North Dakota. Mineral rights. It sounded like something out of a dusty old Western novel, utterly foreign to my urban existence. My share wasn't life-changing money, not in the grand scheme of things. Not enough to buy a house or even a decent car. But it was the first time in a month, maybe longer, I could breathe through my nose without the constant constriction of fear and despair. It was enough to get a proper meal, a clean bed, a moment of respite from the relentless struggle. It was a lifeline, thrown from the past, from a woman who, even in death, seemed to be looking out for me. The lawyer's note, formal and precise, ended with a sentence that burrowed deep into my mind, echoing Ruth's own unconventional wisdom. Ruth always believed you had the stomach for risk. Maybe buy yourself something that grows. I stared at that sentence longer than the check, longer than the notarized letter. Something that grows. What did that even mean? I'd never owned dirt, only debt. My entire life had been about consumption, about providing, about maintaining. The idea of growing, of investing in something tangible that could yield more, felt utterly revolutionary. It was a seed of an idea, planted in the barren landscape of my recent past, a tiny sprout of hope in the desert of my despair. Ruth, even from beyond the grave, was challenging me, pushing me to see beyond the immediate, to think strategically, to dare. That check, that cryptic message from Aunt Ruth, it ignited something in me. A spark, a flicker of possibility. I traded phone data, what little I had left on my cracked smartphone, for knowledge. My first desperate search query, typed with trembling fingers in the dim light of the shelter's common area, was, "How to buy a building with no credit and $5,000. The algorithm, I swear, must have laughed. A digital snort of derision. My query was too outlandish, too impossible. But then, it spat out forums. Forums filled with jargon I barely understood. Tax lien sales, owner finance duplexes, hard money bridge loans. It was a whole new world, a clandestine economy operating just beneath the surface of everyday life. Every night, precisely at 9, when the shelter's curfew kicked in and the lights dimmed, I'd shove earplugs in, open my cracked laptop, and take notes by the hallway light. The screen glowed, illuminating a path I never knew existed. I learned about LLCs, limited liability companies, anonymous, cheap to set up, and bulletproof if you filed them right. It sounded like a secret weapon, a shield against personal ruin, a way to play in the big leagues without being seen. I devoured articles on eviction moratoriums, rent rolls, and triple net leases. Concepts that, weeks ago, would have been utterly meaningless, now felt vital, urgent. I was a student again, but this time, the stakes were impossibly high. This wasn't about grades, it was about survival. I learned that scared money doesn't make money. That's what all the gurus said, the real estate moguls in their slick videos. But I also learned something else, something far more visceral and true. Desperate money sometimes does. When you have nothing left to lose, when your back is truly against the wall, you find a kind of courage, a recklessness that can sometimes pay off. It's not about being fearless. It's about being so terrified of going back to where you were that you were willing to try anything, to risk everything, to fight with a ferocity you never knew you possessed. Google wasn't just a search engine. It was my university, my mentor, my lifeline to a future I was determined to carve out for myself. 37 days. 37 days after my daughter locked my old door, after I was cast out, the county held its monthly tax sale. It was a cold, rainy day, the kind where the damp seeps into your bones. I rode 2 buses, clutching a manila envelope to my chest like a treasure map. Inside, my check, carefully endorsed, my ID, and the freshly printed articles of organization for Maple Leaf Holdings LLC. The name I'd chosen felt solid, hopeful, a nod to resilience. The building on the auction sheet, listed with a cryptic parcel number and a blurry photograph, sent a shockwave through me. My heart nearly stopped. It couldn't be. But as I scanned the address, my breath hitched. You guessed it, her building. The very triplex where I had lived, where I had watched her grow up, where I had been so cruelly dismissed. The irony, the sheer audacious cruelty of fate, was almost too much to bear. Back taxes owed $9,400, a staggering sum. Opening bid, the taxes plus fees, $11,200. I had $4,300, a fraction of what was needed. My logical brain screamed, "This is insane. You can't do this." But something else, a primal urge, a defiant spirit, pushed me forward. I figured I'd watch, learn, dream. Just being there, in the room, felt like a small victory, a silent protest. The auction room itself was a sterile, echoing space, filled with a handful of seasoned investors, their faces impassive, their pens poised. The bidding started, a monotonous drone of numbers. The investors yawned, their attention drifting. Then came the description of the triplex. Property located at basement smelled of mold, minor structural issues. The words hung in the air, a deterrent. The investors, these sharks who smelled weakness, seemed unimpressed. They wanted easy money, quick flips. The mold, the perceived problems scared them off. They folded one by one. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, my chance. On a whim, a surge of adrenaline mixed with pure, unadulterated defiance, I raised my card. 11,200. My voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the quiet. Silence. A beat. 2 beats. No counter. The auctioneer, a bored-looking man in a rumpled suit, looked around the room one last time. No one. Then, the sharp, decisive crack of the gavel. Sold. To the lady clutching a shelter hygiene kit. He didn't say it with malice, just a tired observation. But the words, so stark, so humiliating, were a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen, and how far I had yet to climb. I now owed the balance, a terrifying $6,900 in 10 days, or lose the deposit. 10 days. It felt like an impossible mountain to climb. I walked outside, the rain still falling, blurring the world around me. The triumph, the shock, the sheer impossibility of it all welled up inside me. I found myself behind a taco truck, the smell of sizzling onions and cilantro, a strange counterpoint to my raw emotions, and I ugly cried. Not just tears, but deep guttural sobs, the kind that empty you out. Tears of fear, tears of disbelief, and tears, surprisingly, of a fierce, burgeoning hope. 10 days. That was the deadline. 10 days to come up with nearly $7,000, where everything I'd fought for, everything I'd dared to dream, would vanish. There was no time for self-pity, no room for doubt. My old Corolla, faithful companion of my darkest nights, was the first to go. I drove it to a junkyard, the engine sputtering its last protests. The man at the counter, with grease-stained hands and a sympathetic gaze, handed me $900 in crumpled bills. It felt like tearing off a limb, but it was a start. Next, the gold locket. A delicate engraved piece, a gift from my own mother when my daughter was born. It held tiny photos of us, smiling, innocent. The pawn shop owner weighed it, his eyes cold and assessing. $310. Each dollar felt like a piece of my past, stripped away. But the future, the fragile possibility of a future, demanded these sacrifices. Then came the hustle. Craigslist became my battleground. I took every gig I could find, no matter how dirty, how demeaning. Lawn aeration, the rhythmic thud of the aerator vibrating through my arms, my back aching. Gutter cleaning, precariously perched on a ladder, scooping out slimy leaves and debris. Overnight dog sitting for a couple who paid under the table, their house smelling faintly of stale cigarettes and privilege, while I slept on their lumpy couch, dreaming of deeds and deadlines. By day 9, I had scraped together $7,800. Just enough. But it wasn't easy. I had to swallow every molecule of pride, every last shred of dignity I thought I had left, and make another call. The lawyer. Aunt Ruth's lawyer. Any advance on the mineral money? My voice was barely a whisper, thick with exhaustion and desperation. He paused. Then, to my utter astonishment, he agreed. He wired the remainder against future royalties at 0% interest. Ruth instructed me to trust your timing, he said, his voice kind. Aunt Ruth, still pulling strings, still believing in me, even when I barely believed in myself. I paid the county. The clerk, a different one this time, handed me a thick stack of papers. The deed. The deed to the triplex. Name on title, Maple Leaf Holdings, LLC, care of yours truly. It felt surreal, heavy in my hands, a tangible symbol of my impossible journey. I slept in the courthouse parking lot that night, the deed tucked under my sweater like a newborn, a precious, fragile thing I had fought tooth and nail to bring into existence. The concrete was cold, the air crisp, but for the first time in months, I felt a warmth spreading through me, a quiet, fierce sense of accomplishment. I had done it. I had truly landed on my feet, just not in the way anyone, especially my daughter, had ever imagined. I didn't storm the building. There was no theatrical confrontation, no triumphant return. That wasn't my style, not anymore. My power now was quiet, methodical, legal. The first thing I did was hire a local handyman, a gruff but reliable fellow named Frank, to change the exterior locks. All of them. It was a simple, practical step, but it felt profoundly significant. The sheriff, when I'd called to confirm, had stated it plainly. A tax deed wipes prior leases. My daughter's lease, the one I had co-signed, was null and void. The past, legally speaking, was erased. Next, I posted a fresh for rent sign, sleek and professional, with my new Google Voice number prominently displayed. Anonymity was my shield, my new identity as management. Then, I rented a modest studio across town, a small, clean space that felt like a sanctuary after months of transient living. I showered for the first time in what felt like weeks, letting the hot water wash away not just the grime, but the lingering residue of humiliation. While the water ran, I applied for a property manager license online, another layer of professionalism, another step in solidifying my new role. Every month, like clockwork, her rent check arrived via ACH. On time, polite, and utterly oblivious. She didn't know. She had no idea who Maple Leaf Holdings was. I cashed it, paid the water bill, handled the small repairs, and kept my mouth shut. There was a quiet satisfaction in the routine, in the sheer efficiency of it all. Revenge, I discovered, is best served anonymous and solvent. It wasn't about gloating. It was about reclaiming control, about demonstrating a strength she thought I lacked. It was about proving, to myself more than anyone, that I was not, and never would be, disposable. The quiet hum of the building's finances, the steady flow of income, became a soothing balm to the wounds of betrayal. 6 months in, the honeymoon phase of quiet power started to fade, replaced by the pragmatic realities of property ownership. Property taxes jumped unexpectedly, a new assessment hitting my mailbox like a brick. And then Frank, my handyman, called with the bad news. The roof needed tarring, a significant expense that couldn't wait. The numbers weren't just numbers anymore. They were real costs, responsibilities. I ran comps, comparing my triplex to similar units in her zip code. The market had surged. Units in her area, even with the moldy basement, had seen an 18% increase in rent since I acquired the property. It was a business decision, a purely financial one, to ensure the building remained profitable and well-maintained. I drafted a courteous email, professional and to the point. No emotion, just facts. Effective next quarter, due to rising property taxes and necessary capital improvements, rent for all units will rise by $275. Thank you for your understanding. I signed it simply, Sincerely, management. My finger hovered over the send button. There was a flicker of hesitation, a ghost of the old maternal instinct, but I pushed it down. This was business. This was the boundary. Within minutes, my phone rang. Her number. My heart gave a strange little lurch, a mix of apprehension and a perverse sort of anticipation. I let it go to voicemail. I needed to hear her words without the immediate pressure of a live conversation. Her voice, when I finally listened, was fragile, trembling slightly. "Hi, this is Unit 2B. Is there any room to negotiate? My fiancé just lost his job." I felt the old maternal tug, a familiar ache in my chest, the instinct to protect, to provide, to soften the blow. But then, vivid as a photograph, I pictured those bleach-scented motel rooms, the cold car, the endless nights of fear and humiliation. I remembered her casual shrug, her dismissive words. That tug, that old ingrained programming snapped. I picked up my phone. I texted back, keeping it impersonal, firm. "Sorry, building-wide policy. Happy to provide a referral list of affordable alternatives." I hated myself for the grin that spread across my face, a grim, triumphant mask. It wasn't pure joy. It was a complex cocktail of vindication, pain, and a chilling recognition of how much I had changed. The old me, the mom who stitched prom dresses, would have moved mountains for her. The new me, the landlord, was simply doing business. And the business, I realized, was brutally effective. She missed the first month of the increase, just outright missed it. It wasn't a partial payment, it was nothing. The late fee kicked in automatically, a $50 flat charge, then an additional $10 daily. It was all clearly outlined in the lease, a document she had likely barely glanced at when she signed it. The irony wasn't lost on me. A few days later, an email arrived. A scanned doctor's note, official-looking, citing stress-induced shingles. A desperate plea, a bid for sympathy. The old me would have rushed to her side, brought her soup, worried sick. The new me, the landlord, forwarded it to my accountant. He simply shrugged, a silent confirmation that medical notes don't pay rent. The rules were the rules. Day 22. Still no full payment. Then, a partial payment came through, $600 short. Not enough to cover the increased rent and the mounting late fees. This wasn't just a missed payment. It was a breach of contract, a clear violation. I felt a cold knot in my stomach, a strange mix of dread and a steely resolve. I served a pay-or-quit notice. It was a standard legal form, but as I taped it to her door, just as she had once taped my own eviction notice to my door, the circle felt complete, chillingly so. I watched the security feed from my new anonymous office. Blake, her fiancé, came home first. He saw the notice. I watched him rip the paper in half, his face contorted in rage, cursing the greedy landlord. He paced, gesticulated, his anger a visible, sputtering flame. I leaned closer to the monitor, my voice a whisper, barely audible even to myself. "It's just business, sweetheart." My own words tasted foreign, metallic, like pennies on my tongue. They were true, yes, but they were also a shield, a justification, a mantra to keep the maternal heart from bleeding. It was business. It had to be. But the echo of her voice, trembling on the voicemail, still resonated, a discordant note in my carefully constructed fortress of professionalism. The panic spiral was hers, but the metallic taste was all mine. She requested a formal hearing. It was her right as a tenant, a last-ditch effort to avoid eviction. I received the summons, crisp and official, and my stomach tightened. This was it, the public stage, the confrontation I had both anticipated and dreaded. I attended via Zoom. My camera was off. My name displayed simply as Maple Leaf Holdings, a faceless entity. It felt appropriate. She sat in the living room I once painted sage green, a color I had carefully chosen to bring peace and warmth into her first adult home. Now, she looked gaunt, bags under her eyes, her posture defeated. The familiar setting, juxtaposed with her distress, was a stark reminder of how far we had fallen. The judge, a calm, measured voice on the screen, asked if we could mediate, if there was any room for compromise. My mind raced. The old me would have caved immediately, offered forgiveness, a lifeline. But the new me, the landlord, had a different agenda. I offered a payment plan, yes, but it was triple the increase, spread over 6 months, with zero forgiveness for past arrears or late fees. It was a path, but a steep one, designed to make her understand the full weight of her choices. She hesitated, her eyes darting off screen, presumably to Blake, who I imagined was just out of frame, still unemployed, still a drain. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, she accepted. When the judge closed the call, formally ending the proceedings, she exhaled so hard the webcam fogged, a visible release of tension, a surrender. I closed my laptop, the screen going black, reflecting my own weary face. I stared at a blank wall for an hour, waiting for joy, for triumph, for the sweet taste of victory. But it never arrived. There was only a hollow ache, a profound sense of emptiness. I had won, yes, but at what cost? The silence in my studio apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the emotional storm that had just transpired. The victory felt less like a celebration and more like a quiet, agonizing amputation. One Saturday morning, I found myself pulling on an old navy sweater, soft and worn, the one she used to borrow, claiming it smelled like home. It was a strange, almost unconscious choice, a ghost of the past clinging to me. I climbed the exterior stairs of the triplex, each step a deliberate ascent, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm. I knocked. She opened the door, her eyes puffy, still marked by stress and sleepless nights. In her hand, clutched like a shield, was a crumpled printout of her lease agreement, no doubt hoping to find some loophole, some forgotten clause. "Hey, kiddo, got a minute?" I said, my voice softer than I intended, a strange mix of the old mom and the new landlord. She blinked twice, her brow furrowed in confusion, trying to place my face, my voice. Then, slowly, the color drained from her face. Recognition dawned, a dawning horror that spread across her features like an ink stain. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I handed her a fresh envelope, crisp and white. Inside, a copy of the deed to the triplex, my name redacted except for tiny letters at the bottom. Managing member, Maple Leaf Holdings. It was all there, undeniable. Her knees buckled. She caught the doorframe, her hand scrabbling for purchase, her entire body trembling. I spoke softly, my voice barely above a whisper, but each word carried the weight of months of pain, of struggle, of silent resolve. "You taught me one thing. Everyone needs an address. You made sure I didn't have one, so I just bought the one you gave me." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, like taffy pulled taut. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with years of history, with raw, exposed wounds. She finally whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "Are you evicting me?" I shook my head slowly, a gesture that was both denial and confirmation. "No, not today. But the market sets the rent, same as life sets consequences. Pay on time, you stay. Treat people like disposable, the bill comes due." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a hard-won truth, my truth. I turned to leave, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. But then, her hand shot out, grabbing my sleeve. The same desperate, childlike move she used to make at 5 years old, clutching my hand crossing a busy street, fearing she'd be lost. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot, finally breaking. I gently removed her hand, the touch fleeting, almost imperceptible. "Me too," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "But sorry doesn't cash the check." I walked down those stairs slower than I climbed them, each step a deliberate farewell to the mother she thought she knew, and a firm embrace of the woman I had become. The past was a foreign country now, and I was a stranger there. She paid the full amount within 48 hours. The urgency, the sudden availability of funds, spoke volumes. Turns out she sold Blake's collectible motorbike, his prized possession, sacrificed to keep her roof over her head. The irony was sharp, almost sweet. We now communicate strictly through email. The subject lines are always formal, impersonal. Maintenance request, leaky faucet, rent payment confirmation, notice of pest control. There are no pleasantries, no familial warmth, just the sterile exchange of landlord-tenant communication. I respond promptly to repairs. That's the contract. That's the line. I keep things professional, efficient. That's the boundary between punishment and petty revenge. I'm not here to torture her, only to ensure the rules are followed, that the debt, both financial and emotional, is acknowledged. Some nights the old feelings creep in. I draft long, rambling texts on my phone, filled with raw emotion, texts about therapy, about forgiveness, about the way her hair smelled after kindergarten, sweet and innocent. Texts about how much I miss her, how much I wish things were different. Then I delete them, every single time. It's a ritual, a silent acknowledgement of the lingering ache, followed by a firm reassertion of my new reality. Maybe one day we'll share popcorn again, curled up on a couch, laughing at a bad movie. Maybe. But today, I settle for on-time deposits and quiet hallways. I've stopped checking the security cams for glimpses of her, for signs of regret or longing. Self-respect, I've learned, grows in small withdrawals, in the deliberate act of disconnecting from what hurts, from what no longer serves you. It's a painful pruning, but necessary for new growth. My journey from the streets to the courthouse, from being a discarded mother to a formidable landlord, taught me more than any textbook ever could. I learned that shelters aren't just filled with the down and out. They're full of mothers who gave too much, whose boundless love was exploited, and daughters who asked for more. Always more, until there was nothing left to give. It's a heartbreaking cycle, played out in hushed tones behind thin partitions. I learned that an LLC can't hug you at Christmas, can't offer comfort when you're lonely, but it can absolutely keep rain off your head. It's a cold, hard truth, but a vital one. Financial independence, legal protection, these are not insignificant comforts. They are the bedrock of security when emotional foundations crumble. I learned that revenge is a vitamin, bitter, small, necessary. It's not a full meal, not a sustainable diet, but a potent little capsule that gives you the strength to keep going when you feel utterly depleted. It fuels the fight, the drive to prove them wrong, to reclaim your worth, and forgiveness. Forgiveness is a meal you cook alone. It's a long, slow process, simmering on the back burner. And sometimes, you realize you're not quite ready to serve it, not even to yourself. It's a choice, a journey, not an obligation. Most of all, I learned that being family isn't a deed. It's not an automatic, unchangeable status. It's a daily lease you choose to renew with kindness, with respect, with mutual effort. When one party stops paying their share, when the terms are violated, the lease, the very nature of that relationship, can be irrevocably broken. It's a harsh lesson, learned in the crucible of betrayal. But it's etched into my soul now. If this story rattled your ribs, if it made you gasp or nod along, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, because I've got more real-life family reckonings, more stories of resilience and unexpected turns, coming at you every week, and I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Could you collect rent from your own kid? Or would you tear up the lease, risk the fallout, and try to find a different path? There's no right or wrong answer, just different kinds of courage. Share this with someone nursing a betrayal, someone who feels like they've been thrown out with the trash. Sometimes strangers hand us braver mirrors than blood. They show us what we're truly capable of. And tap that notification bell so YouTube tells you when the next chapter posts, because roofs can be replaced, buildings can be bought, but relationships take longer. A lifetime sometimes. I still flinch when sirens wail, a residual tremor from nights spent in a car, every sound a potential threat. I still hoard canned beans like currency, a small, irrational habit born of genuine scarcity. The trauma leaves its marks, deep and indelible. But every first of the month, the bank alerts me. Deposit cleared, a small ping on my phone. A quiet confirmation that I am safe, that I am secure, that I am solvent. And every sunrise, as the first rays of light stream into my clean, quiet studio, I remind myself, I'm not the woman living in a car anymore. I'm the woman who owns the street where that car once idled. If you're listening from rock bottom, if you're staring up at a sky that feels impossibly far away, file this away. The world might kick you, family might forget you, but deeds are just paper, and paper still bends to whoever dares to pick up the pen. You have the power to rewrite your story, to claim your space, to build your own damn roof. It won't be easy, but it will be yours. And sometimes that's all that matters.